Hi, welcome to this webinar. My name is Adele Martin and I am a HR and business support consultant and founder of Garda Support Services. Data protection and cyber security risks are something which are inherent at the moment in relation to HR. Now, data protection issues have an impact on most HR activities on a daily basis, whether it be recruitment, record keeping, retention, performance monitoring and references. However, during Covid-19, many data protection issues have arisen as a result of various challenges, for example, sharing health information and the logistics of home working having become a necessity for many. So, who better to offer our small, medium enterprise owners practical solutions to those problems, and that is a data protection and cyber security specialist, the amazing Emma Green. I'll hand you over.
Thank you, Adele. That's very kind, very flattering. Yes, I'm Emma Green from Green CDL. I'm a trainer and consultant in data protection and cyber security. I have a postgraduate certificate in data protection law and information governance. Green CDL, the CDL stands for Cyber Data Protection and Legal Services, and it's broken down into 3 areas. So we provide training, face-to-face training. Currently, a lot of that's done remotely, virtual instructor-led training. We provide e-learning for organisations. We do consultancy for businesses to help them understand and mitigate their risks from cybersecurity attacks and data protection breaches. And we provide legal services. My partner, John, he is a lawyer, so we deal with lots of confidential inquiries. And finally, we offer Cyber Essentials. We are a trusted partner of the Manchester Cyber Resilience Centre and a certifying body for Cyber Essentials, so we can issue Cyber Essentials to businesses.
Wow, that's amazing, Emma. Okay, what we'll do is we'll go through various scenarios, and if you can respond with your practical solutions, and then we can take it from there. Okay?
Yep.
Yep. Fine. Okay, scenario number 1. A financial services company whose local has up to 10 full-time members of staff. At the start of lockdown, they made the appropriate arrangements to close the doors and start working remotely from home. Now, 50% of their members are actually working remotely, but using their own laptops or PCs to access the company's network. Now, the shift to working from home happened over a matter of days, and with so much emphasis being placed on business continuity, there wasn't much thought in relation to network security. Would you say that's a significant cyber risk for this organisation?
Yes, yeah, I would, Adele. There are a number of alarm bells ringing here. I mean, the scenario you describe is one of the most notable changes in security needs to impact businesses since the start of the pandemic. That rapid ramp up to working from home. Working from home was really just once a week for a lot of organisations, but it suddenly became the norm overnight. And we saw, large organisations' networks struggle to cope with 100% of staff working from home. That rapid implementation of software and equipment to allow staff to work from home and collaborate. Tools and software may not have been thoroughly tested, or procurement processes followed as thoroughly as it usually is. We even advised a client who turned off 2-factor authentication just to get up and running, which just left them so vulnerable. And those cyber criminals, they really know that. And as you said, this company allowing employees to use their own personal devices, they need to ensure that those personal laptops are accessing company information securely, and any data on those laptops can't be breached. From a policy perspective, there needs to be a really robust bring your own device policy in place. And if there isn't one, then there needs to be one put in place as soon as possible. Is that something that you've got experience of?
Yeah, certainly from a remote working policy. Obviously, from an IT perspective, they normally get involved with drafting the policy. Is that something which you'd recommend as well?
Yes, I would.
Yeah.
Those policies will outline what that employee can and can't do. And I'd encourage staff also, if they haven't done any, to do some cyber awareness training and data protection training. What's been the most significant cybercrime since the start of this pandemic has been this exponential explosion in phishing emails, COVID-19 related phishing emails. Since the start of the pandemic, there's been a 400% increase in cybercrime. So it's really important that even though companies may have fancy tech to try and filter out these phishing emails, some are still getting through. So it's really important that employees are vigilant.
Yeah.
In terms of keeping those laptops secure, there's some really simple steps that they can take. So make sure that your passwords are complex and changed regularly, and use passphrases. You would be staggered how many passwords are out on the dark web that can easily be gleaned. Most people don't change their passwords, or they have one password for everything. So if they've got your password, they may have your password to your bank, you know, to your Facebook accounts. We're seeing huge amounts of social media hacks at the moment. Once they've got access to your social media, the criminals are then sending requests out to all contacts claiming to be you, to say, oh, you know, can't pay my rent this month, I've been furloughed, could transfer some money. And only last week, the police were telling me that somebody fell for it and paid their friend, in quotes, £360, which they're never going to recover. Yeah. Make sure that you enable two-factor authentication. That's where you get a secondary text to notify you of any change for login, for example. Use a VPN that encrypts the connection for you. Keep your software patches up to date. Make sure you've got antivirus in place. Make sure that you take backups, regular backups. So if there should be a ransomware attack, and ransomware, like phishing, has gone through the roof, because the criminals know that as a company, you're so reliant on your tech that they can take advantage of any loopholes.
Yeah. For small companies though, Emma, I mean, would you recommend getting a separate hard drive, separate backup hard drive?
Separate.
Would you get a good return on investment really if?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of backup solutions out there, lots of backup via cloud these days. I'd speak to your IT, because it's all dictated really by budget, what really can you afford. You need to also identify what's your core data. So if everything went, you know, Tango uniform, then you would be able to get back up and running. So identify your risks and make sure that, you know, you protect your biggest asset, and that might be your IP, that might be certain documents and so on.
Yeah.
Talking about access control. So everybody working at home now means that, you know, we've got access to the cloud. You need to make sure that that's tightly controlled, and that only those who need to get access to certain data do. So for example, very significant for HR, all your HR records might be shoved up into the cloud. Make sure that only those people who meant to have access to that data should. Also, there's been this massive increase in using free collaborative tools such as Zoom. I mean, we're using Zoom, but we use a paid tool. Lots of those free tools, they're absolutely great because they've helped people to connect with their colleagues and co-workers. But the issue is that sometimes something that's free can be too good to be true. And there's been horror stories of Zoom bombing, where people have been doing webinars and baddies have been displaying distasteful pictures. So just educate your employees to make sure that they're aware of what they're using. Keep your firewalls up to date, and long term, if these employees are going to be working from home, or your company may say, you know what, we save a fortune on rent, everybody work from home for now, and it might be a good idea to actually consider buying company laptops for those individuals, because then that gives you a bit more control, or at least installing some mobile device management software.
Yeah.
All right. Other risks that spring to mind is your working environment. I mean, you look like you've got a fabulously set up office.
Or dining table.
Which leads me on to the kitchen table.
Yeah.
with the kids and the dog and the door going and Amazon and the parcels.
There's so many distractions.
Homeschooling. I can't log on to Google when you're in the middle of a webinar. I've had that. So, studies have shown that employees are just not as vigilant as they would be in the office. Their guard is down. And also they may think, I need to get a document to so-and-so. And they may just think, you know what, let's just shove it on Dropbox, which is, completely insecure and would not be allowed in the office. So educating those employees, training those employees, putting it into your company policies so that they know what they can and can't do from home. And then finally, this whole concept of working from home, it suits some, it doesn't suit everybody. I mean, I love it. Do you like it, working from home?
No, not all the time. I'll be honest. I'm one of those hybrids. I prefer a little bit of a mix.
Bit of both.
Yeah, just to get out and start mixing and mingling with people. I do miss the face-to-face contact, and with lockdown. So
yeah, no, I just like slobbing around in my stretchy trousers all day. So, but it, as you said, it suits some but not others.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure you've got a working from home policy. You do this assessments, because we talked about security, of keeping data secure, the theme of this webinar. But there's many more things to consider. There's your employees' mental health. There's the health and safety issue. Are they sat appropriately at their desk so they're not going to end up with crippling themselves? And the insurance, if somebody's going to be working at home indefinitely, will their contents insurance cover any accidents and so on? I mean, is that the kind of thing that you've been seeing? Yeah,
I mean, it's certainly, I'd definitely recommend that any employers not only inform their employers' liability insurers that their staff are going to be remote working, whether it's indefinitely or whether it's from a hybrid perspective, and certainly for your employees to be making inquiries with their own home insurance.
Yeah.
And potentially just, I don't know how far really you would go to that side in relation to home insurance, but it's certainly a question that I'd raise with employees, especially if you've got your PCs, and your employers' PCs or laptops or even any other equipment that's being moved and relocated from the office.
What happens if you have a trip or a fall, and all these kinds of things to consider. So it's not the it's not what everybody think it is. There's more to it than just bunging somebody a laptop and off you go. So.
No, completely agree with you. We'll move on to the next scenario. Now, this is in relation to data subject access requests, and a company has regretfully had to make 25% of their members furloughed, with a potential risk that they will be made redundant in the near future. Now, the company has been quite transparent, and their HR has relocated, so all their HR are remote working, and their resource has been limited now down to one member. However, they're seeing an increase in data subject access requests from their employees. So basically, they do have to comply with the 1 month period, but with the lack of resource, obviously there's going to be challenges in that respect, and they're not actually in the office. So is an issue around time periods and when they have to comply with these requests, and also what information in relation to future plans, in relation to redundancies or financial, do they have to disclose if certain members have been included in those negotiations or consultations?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and we get asked this quite a lot at the moment. There's nothing in the GDPR or the Data Protection Act 2018 that says there's exemptions for responding to DSARs longer than a month because of a pandemic. So technically, these data subject access requests, we call them DSARs, must be responded to within 1 month. But companies can inform data subjects that they need to extend another 2 months. And you tell them, you don't ask for permission, you tell them. And in these circumstances, I think that will be acceptable. The ICO have made it clear that they won't be too hard on companies during this pandemic, as we all need to be a little bit more reasonable and understanding in these challenging times. And just to quote what they've said, They say we can't extend statutory timescales, but we will tell people through our own communications channels that they may experience understandable delays when making information rights requests during this pandemic. And I would agree. In terms of what you would disclose to those individuals, unfortunately, there's no sort of vanilla formula. It will be very much on a case-by-case basis. It will really depend on what the data subject is asking for. In terms of what you release, there are several exemptions under the Data Protection Act that companies can rely on so that they wouldn't have to disclose some of the types of data that you mentioned. But it really will depend on what it is that they are asking for. So we can't give you a definitive yes or no. It's called 50 shades of grey, to be honest, in between. So you can rely on exemptions, so you don't need to disclose that data. You don't have to tell them the exemption, you can just withhold it. But one alarm bell that kind of rings for me is a bigger concern is if staff have been put on notice that you're going to potentially make them redundant and starting to fire off DSARs. DSARs are usually used either at the end of a complaints process. It can be used vexatiously, but sometimes they're often used to try and catch you out. So to make you disclose something that they potentially could use against you. So you need to be very, very careful in these situations what you do and don't disclose. You've got some very disgruntled employees. So another big concern would be insider threats. And it's becoming an increasing problem. Every week we receive statistics from the Northwest Weekly Police Trends. And only last week there was a cosmetic clinic was breached by a disgruntled ex-employee. So from HR and IT, you need to ensure that you've got a very robust offboarding process. Also consider if you have told somebody and they do have really extensive access to lots of systems, you might want to consider amending what access they have, or maybe having somebody else take over what they have access to. Otherwise, you're potentially heading for another skeleton.
All right, thanks, Emma. Okay, third and final scenario. An organisation is in the process of returning to the office. They are doing that on a staggered return. And it's anticipated that there's going to be an increase in health data being collected by HR department. So the question, if a member does come down with symptoms of COVID-19, then would the company be able to tell other staff about members of staff who have the virus? And what would be the extent of the information that would be shared in that scenario?
So one of the big misconceptions is that we can't do this because of data protection. But you can collect that types of data. The principles will still apply. So you still need to be adhering to those principles. So we need to make sure that we're very transparent to the data subject, what we're collecting. We need to specify why we're collecting it, for what purpose we're collecting it. We only need to collect what's necessary. We only need to keep it for no longer than is necessary, and we must make sure that we keep it secure. The ICO have come out with 6 steps, which some may find useful, but to be honest with you, it's just no different to any other type of data protection. There's nothing new in there. Data protection doesn't prevent you from taking the necessary steps to keep your staff and public safe in this public emergency. But in terms of what you collect, how you collect it, and how you inform your staff, you need to consider the type of work that you do, your premises, and whether it's possible for those employees to work from home. Ideally, you set that all out and we'd update the employee handbook and privacy notice. However, we do understand that might not be achievable during this pandemic. In terms of processing those special categories of health data, there is an exemption under Article 92H of the GDPR, which says that we can collect that data as an employer and for occupational health reasons, we can collect that data. So the thing to be is completely open and transparent, inform the employees what you are collecting. The ICO focus on accountability, so make sure you've done a data protection impact assessment, make sure your policies, procedures are in place. But the main thing is, as long as they're aware of what you are collecting and why you are collecting it, that's the key point to take away.
Okay, thanks, Emma. Okay, so that's the end of our webinar. However, what I do want to do is, because there was a lot of useful tips and practical solutions given during that webinar, I'm going to put together a checklist. So if anybody has any further questions or would like a copy of that checklist, then please feel free to email us in, and we will provide details of our email. And then, yeah, so any questions, feel free to fire them off to myself or Emma, and we'll do our best to help you. Thanks, Emma.
Great, thanks, Adele.